Some nights, the road is just a long, black ribbon of nothing. Your only friends are the deep, chest-rattling rumble of your Cummins diesel, the ghost of a bacon cheeseburger you murdered 3 states back, and the sad sack country singer on the radio wailing about his lost dog and his ex-wife, who probably ran off with the dog. This was one of those nights. The sky had ripped clean open, and rain was coming down sideways, trying to power wash the whole damn state of Tennessee right off the map. The neon sign for the Sleepy Lizard truck stop was a blurry, bleeding mess smeared across my wet windshield. It blinked on and off, a sickly green pulse like a dying man trying to send a message in Morse code. Lizard, lizard, lizard. A fitting name for a place that probably had things living in the showers that hadn't been seen since the Jurassic period, and they probably charged extra for the privilege of sharing a stall with them. I was parked out in the back 40, the unofficial graveyard where rigs go to die or just catch a few hours of shut-eye before hitting the grind again. I was letting my rig, a big, beautiful Peterbilt 379 I call the Steel Stallion, cool her jets after a long haul. She's black as sin with enough chrome to blind a pilot on a sunny day, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the grim, gray world around us. My pride and joy. I was halfway through a burger with the structural integrity of a mudslide, thinking about finding a spot to shut down for the night and crawl into my sleeper. The patty was greasy. The cheese was the kind of plastic yellow that doesn't exist in nature, and the bun was giving up the ghost under the onslaught of questionable sauce. But it was hot, and it was mine. That's when my world, which was already pretty tilted thanks to the god-awful camber of the parking lot, tilted completely on its axis. It started as a flicker in my passenger side mirror, the big convex one that makes everything look a little further away and a lot more desperate. A flash of white against the black, slick asphalt. I figured it was a piece of trash, maybe a plastic bag caught in the gale, trying to make a break for freedom. Lord knows this lot was full of them, a carpet of discarded humanities wrappers and receipts. But the white thing was moving with a purpose. It was moving fast. And holy hell, it had legs. Holy Mother of God, did it have legs? Long, pale, and moving like a champion racehorse in the final stretch of the Kentucky Derby. It was a girl, running straight for my truck, splashing barefoot through puddles of oily rainbow-sheened water, not giving a damn about the gravel and broken glass that covers every truck stop in America, like a crunchy, dangerous carpet. And the only thing covering her was a little white towel. The kind of towel you get at a roach motel that's barely big enough to be a napkin, thin and worn and probably older than me. The kind of towel that makes you question if you're actually any cleaner after using it. She had it clutched to her chest, with one arm like it was the goddamn Holy Grail, her other arm waving like she was trying to flag down a rescue chopper in the middle of the ocean. Rain plastered her dark hair to her face, to her neck, to her shoulders, turning it into a black, glistening helmet. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. I could see the tracks even through the downpour, but the rain was washing them away before they had a chance to fall, mixing with the deluge. I stabbed the button on the radio, cutting off Johnny Paycheck mid-whine about taking this job and shoving it. The cab went dead silent except for the angry drumming of rain on the roof and the low, steady growl of my engine, a comfortable vibration I could feel in the fillings of my teeth and the base of my spine. It was the truck's heartbeat, and right then, it felt like my own. She reached my passenger door and started beating on it, a frantic, hollow thump, thump, thump of her little fist against 16-gauge steel. Her face was pressed to the glass, Her eyes wide and full of a terror I hadn't seen since a rookie cop pulled me over with a full load of illegal fireworks near the Arizona border. Her mouth was open, forming words I couldn't hear over the storm's fury, her breath fogging a small patch on the cold glass. "Please," she screamed, her voice a muffled, desperate plea against the storm. "Oh, God, please, you have to help me. Now, I'm Sam. I've seen things out here that would make a preacher kick out a stained glass window. I've seen a guy try to trade me a wooden leg for a tank of diesel. I've seen a lot lizard with a pet raccoon on a leash, both of them wearing matching denim vests, no joke. I've seen a man try to pay for fuel with a live chicken, arguing it was organic currency. But I had never, in 30 years of hauling ass from coast to coast, seen a woman who looked like she'd just fallen off the cover of a magazine, wearing nothing but a prayer and a piece of cotton, trying to break into my rig like her life depended on it. My gut, full of burger and cheap coffee, pressed hard against the steering wheel as I leaned my whole frame across the wide cab. The worn leather of the driver's seat groaned under my 300-pound frame, a familiar protest. With a flick of my wrist, I popped the lock. The door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, a sound like a giant sigh of relief, letting in a hurricane of cold wind and rain that smelled of pine and wet earth. And in that moment, as she stood there, shivering and soaked and looking up at me with those terrified eyes, I knew. My night, my truck, and my blood pressure were about to have a serious, life-altering conversation. Full story. The door swung open, and a wall of cold, wet air punched me in the face. It wasn't just cold, it was an assault. It smelled of storm-tossed pine trees from the woods bordering the lot, of wet asphalt baking under the halogen lights, and of pure, uncut panic. It was a clean smell, a wild smell, that cut right through the comfortable funk of stale coffee, old French fries, and diesel that usually filled my cab. She didn't waste a second. She grabbed the overhead handle, her one free hand still death-gripping that sad little towel to her chest, and tried to haul herself up into the cab. Let me tell you something. Climbing into a Peterbilt is a 3-step process. It's a hike. It ain't a Prius. For a barefoot girl wrapped in a dish rag, it was like trying to scale the damn Grand Canyon in flip-flops during a rock slide. She got one slick bare foot onto the first step, the ridged metal cold and unforgiving against her soft skin. I saw her calf muscle bunch up, a taut and perfect knot of athletic power. Then her muscles strained as she tried to pull her own body weight up, her arm trembling with the effort. The movement was all it took. The towel, already fighting a losing war with gravity, common sense, and the laws of physics, slipped. It slid down a good 4-5 inches, maybe more. My breath got stuck somewhere in my throat, lodged behind a piece of half-chewed bacon. I got a high-definition panoramic view of the slick, perfect curve of her hip and the top of a thigh that was smoother than a brand-new stretch of interstate in California. For a split second, a single, glorious frame of time, I saw the pale shadow where her tan line would be, a secret little hint of summer hidden away in the middle of this cold, rainy night. My mouth went desert dry. The half-eaten burger sitting in my lap suddenly seemed like the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen, a greasy monument to my lonely life. I swiped it off onto the floor without even looking, where it landed with a wet, pathetic splat next to the clutch. Priorities, you know. "Here, damn it, grab on," I grunted, my voice sounding like I'd been gargling gravel and rust. I stuck a big, greasy paw out into the rain, a paw that could palm a basketball if I gave a damn about sports, a hand that had tightened more lug nuts than I could count. She took it. Her hand was tiny and freezing, her fingers like little icicles against my calloused skin, but her grip was surprisingly strong, desperate, the kind of grip that says, "I am not letting go, not now, not ever." I gave a solid pull. I've hoisted 200-pound transmissions with less effort, and she scrambled up the rest of the way, tumbling into the passenger seat in a heap of long, wet hair, pale skin, and that ridiculously inadequate piece of fabric. She landed with a soft oof, a tangle of limbs and shivering, her bare legs sprawled for a moment on the black vinyl before she quickly tried to gather herself. The door was still hanging open, letting the storm dump gallons of water all over my custom stallion floor mats. I leaned across her, my big arm brushing against her bare back to grab the handle. Her skin was like ice. It was covered in a fine layer of goosebumps, a million tiny mountains on a plain of perfect skin, and I could feel every single tiny bump against the coarse hair on my forearm. A jolt went through me that had nothing to do with the wintry blast from outside. It was a short circuit, a spark jumping a gap between two live wires that had no business being so close. I slammed the door shut, and the world outside vanished. The heavy thunk of the latch catching was the most final sound I'd ever heard, sealing us in. Suddenly the cab was a sealed capsule, small, quiet, and intensely personal. The only light was the emerald green glow from my dashboard gauges, painting her skin in weird, otherworldly tones, making the water droplets on her shoulders and collarbones look like tiny green jewels. The only sound was the steady, hypnotic thwack-slap of the windshield wipers and the deep, comforting rumble of the engine vibrating up through the floor, a constant, low thrum against our feet, a physical presence in the small space. And her, trying to catch her breath in little shaky gasps that fogged the air in front of her face, each puff of white vapor a testament to the cold and her fear. She pushed herself upright, collecting her limbs, trying to arrange herself with some shred of dignity. It was a losing battle. She tugged the towel back into a position that was marginally more decent, but it was like trying to put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Useless. Water dripped from the ends of her dark hair, running in little rivers down her neck, over her collarbones, and pooling in the perfect shadowy hollow at the base of her throat. I found myself staring at that little pool of water like it held the secrets to the universe, or at least the winning lottery numbers. I could almost taste the salt. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling so much the words barely formed. "Oh my God, I don't know what I would have done. Thank you." Her eyes were huge, dark pools reflecting the green dash lights, still wide with a mix of terror and now a sliver of relief. "Don't mention it, darling," I said, trying for a casual tone, like I host a semi-naked damsel in distress convention in my cab every Tuesday. My voice was still a low rumble. "Now you want to tell old Sam what in the hell happened? You get on the wrong side of a bachelorette party. Lose a bet?" A weak smile touched her lips, a fragile thing, but her eyes were still wide with leftover fear. Worse, I was in the shower. At that place. She jerked her head back towards the glowing, greasy sign of the Sleepy Lizard, saying the name like it tasted like spoiled milk. "It's disgusting. There was stuff on the walls. I think some of it was moving. I had my bag, my wallet, my phone, all my clothes, everything. I put it on the bench right outside the stall. I wasn't in there for 5 minutes. I was just trying to wash the road off me, feel human again. When I came out, it was just gone." "Son of a bitch," I muttered, the words a low growl. I pictured the kind of low-life scum that haunts these places, the bottom feeders, the kind of person who sees a bag and doesn't see a life, just an opportunity. Probably some tweaker who's going to trade your phone for a rock and wear your underwear on his head like a trophy. That finally got a real laugh out of her. It wasn't loud, but it was genuine, like tiny bells ringing in the dead of night. It was a sound that didn't belong in a dirty truck stop, and it instantly made the cab feel a few degrees warmer, less like a cage, and more like a shelter. "Probably," she said, wiping at her wet face with the back of her hand. This was all I had left. She gestured helplessly at the towel, a gesture of pure futility. I ran out, but whoever it was had vanished. I saw a car peeling out of the lot, no plates. I didn't know what to do. I was screaming, but nobody heard me over the rain. I just ran. I saw your truck. It was big, and the engine was running. It looked safe. Safe. My rig, nicknamed the Steel Stallion, with custom mud flaps of a chrome silhouette lady that would make a nun blush, looked safe. I almost choked on my own spit. My truck was many things: powerful, loud, obnoxious, and maybe a little bit sleazy on a good day. But safe? That was a new one. It made something in my chest feel weird. Good weird. "Well, you're safe now," I told her, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. My cab was my kingdom, my castle on 18 wheels, and right now she was under my protection. No one was touching her in my truck, but you're shivering like a dog passing a peach seed. We gotta get you warm. She was. Her whole body was trembling, a constant low-grade vibration that I could almost feel through the seat between us. Her teeth were chattering, a tiny frantic rhythm in the quiet cab, a sound of pure misery. That towel wasn't providing a lick of insulation. It was just a wet, sad reminder of her situation, clinging to her skin and making her colder. I reached down and slammed the heater controls all the way to the right. The fan roared to life like a jet engine, and a wave of hot, dry air started blasting out of the vents. It smelled of diesel, dust, and the faint, sweet aroma of a week-old black ice air freshener. It was the smell of home for me. "Where you headed?" I asked, grabbing the shifter. The tall stick stood right between us, a metal divider in our tiny universe, and her bare knee was maybe an inch of air away from it. Just an inch that felt like a mile and a millimeter all at once. My hand on the knob felt huge and clumsy next to the smooth, pale skin of her leg. "There's a town, Oakhaven. My friend lives there. She's expecting me. It's about 30, maybe 40 miles north on this highway." "Oakhaven, I know the place," I said, releasing the air brake with a loud, satisfying psh. The whole rig settled, ready to move. I eased the stallion out of the muddy lot, the big rig groaning as I cranked the wheel. The power steering whined in protest. I put her in first, then shifted up to second, my knuckles calloused and scarred from a lifetime of wrenches and chains brushed against her knee. It was an accident. Mostly. Her skin was still shockingly cold, but it was soft, impossibly soft, like she'd never done a hard day's work in her life. She flinched, a sharp intake of breath, and pulled her leg back a fraction of an inch, as if she'd been burned by my touch. The spot on my hand where I'd touched her tingled. "Sorry," I mumbled, my eyes glued to the rain-slicked road ahead, trying to pretend it didn't happen, trying to pretend my heart wasn't suddenly beating a little faster. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the heater fan and the rumble of the tires on the pavement. We pulled onto the empty 2-lane highway, the wipers fighting a losing war with the deluge. The cab started to heat up fast, real fast. The windows began to fog, starting at the edges and creeping inward, a slow-moving curtain of steam sealing us in our own little world. It was like the inside of a snow globe, if snow globes were filled with steam and sexual tension. The outside world became a blurry watercolor of headlights and rain, abstract streaks of red and white. I kept sneaking glances at her from the corner of my eye. The heat was working its magic. The goosebumps on her arms and legs were melting away, replaced by a healthy pinkish glow as her circulation returned. A fine sheen of moisture, not rain but sweat, began to form on her skin, making her glisten in the green dash light. She smelled like cheap motel soap, rain, and something else underneath it all. Something warm and feminine, and uniquely her. It was a clean, sweet scent, like flowers after a storm, and it was getting into my head, messing with my wiring, making me think things a gentleman shouldn't. But then again, I ain't no gentleman. To get warmer, she tucked her bare feet up onto the seat, curling into a ball. The move was disastrous for the towel. It rode up, way up. It was no longer a dress, not even a skirt. It was a wide belt. It barely covered the absolute essentials, and I was getting a front-row seat to a pair of long-toned thighs that seemed to go on forever, disappearing into the shadows under the towel. I tried to focus on the road. I really did. I focused on the hypnotic rhythm of the wipers, the rumble of the tires on the wet pavement, the way the yellow lines disappeared under my hood like I was eating them. Anything but the acres of flawless glowing skin sitting 2 feet away from me. It was a goddamn impossibility. My eyes had a mind of their own, and they were traitors, constantly flicking to the passenger seat. Every time I had to shift, it was an exercise in extreme concentration. My hand would leave the wheel, travel through that charged space between us, and find the shifter, and my knuckles, every single time, would graze her skin. My knuckles had a mind of their own, too. First, it was her knee again. Then, as she shifted her position slightly, curling up tighter, it was her mid-thigh. Each time was a tiny electric shock, a spark jumping the gap. I could feel it, and I knew she could too, because after the 3rd or 4th time, she stopped flinching. She didn't pull away. She just let my hand brush against her, her skin getting warmer and warmer with every accidental touch. It became a new rhythm in the cab. Engine rumble, wiper slap, knuckle graze. A dangerous symphony. "I'm Candy, by the way," she said, her voice stronger now, the shivering gone. It was a perfect name for her. Sweet, and a little bit dangerous. The kind of thing you know you shouldn't have, but you want it anyway. "Sam," I said, my own voice coming out a little rougher than I intended. "Pleasure to meet you, Candy, even under the unique circumstances." She laughed that bell-like laugh again. "Yeah, definitely not how I pictured my Tuesday night." She looked down at herself, at the towel stretched to its absolute limit across her chest, a single brave piece of terry cloth holding back the floodgates. God, I must look ridiculous. "Nah," I said, dropping a gear for a slight incline, letting my fingers linger for a fraction of a second longer than was strictly necessary against her thigh. The skin was warm now and so soft. "You look surprising." This old highway was a mess, full of potholes the size of small animals. We hit a big one without warning. The whole cab jolted violently. Bam! The stallion bucked, and Candy yelped, her hands flying down to her lap to grab the towel, which had popped completely open for a split second. A split second was all it took. I got a flash, a perfect freeze-framed image burned onto the retinas of my brain, of the pale, soft curve of a breast, and a dark, rosy nipple, hard from the initial cold, and maybe, just maybe, something more. Then she clamped it shut again, her face a mask of shock and embarrassment. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to bust out and go for a walk. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I could feel the plastic creak under my fingers. The air left my lungs in a rush, like I'd been punched in the gut. "Whoa there," I managed, trying to keep my voice from cracking like a teenager asking a girl to the prom. She was blushing. I could see it clearly, even in the dim green light. A dark crimson flush spreading from her cheeks all the way down her neck and disappearing under the edge of the towel. It was a beautiful sight. "Sorry," she breathed. "This stupid thing." "Don't be sorry," I said, my eyes flicking from the road to her and back again, a dangerous rhythm. My peripheral vision was working overtime. "Road's a real bastard tonight." We hit another bump, a smaller one this time, but she instinctively grabbed the edges of the towel, holding it in place. She looked over at me, her eyes meeting mine in the dark, and a little smile played on her lips. It wasn't a scared smile. It was mischievous. The panic was gone from her eyes, and it had been replaced by something else entirely, something playful and dangerous and thrilling. She knew I'd seen, and she knew I'd liked it. The power dynamic in the cab had just shifted, and it was shifting in her favor. "You're trying to look, aren't you?" she teased, her voice low and husky, a complete 180 from the panicked girl who'd pounded on my door. It was a voice that promised trouble. Good trouble. I let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. The tension broke, just for a second, like a guitar string snapping. "Honey, a 300-pound man is sitting next to a goddess wearing a Kleenex. A dead man would be trying to look." Her smile got wider, bolder. She had fantastic teeth, white and even. "Well, don't," she said, but there was zero conviction in it. It was a token protest. She held my gaze for a beat, her dark eyes challenging me, daring me. Then she added in a voice that was barely a whisper, a secret just for me. "Okay, maybe you can look a little." That was it. That was the goddamn starter pistol. The green flag at Daytona, the air in the cab, already thick and hot and smelling of her, suddenly became as heavy as lead. It was hard to draw a full breath. The rumble of the engine seemed to get deeper, vibrating right up through the floor, through my seat, and into the base of my skull. It was a physical presence now, a deep, masculine growl that surrounded us, cocooning us. She squirmed in her seat, adjusting her position again. "God, this thing is so scratchy," she complained, tugging at the terry cloth. "It's like being wrapped in a Brillo pad, and it's still damp." An idea, a brilliant, terrible, beautiful idea exploded in my brain. It wasn't noble. It wasn't chivalrous. It was pure, selfish genius, born of desperation and opportunity. I got a shirt, in the back, in the sleeper. It's a clean flannel, one of my favorites. It's soft. Her eyes lit up, like a pinball machine hitting the jackpot. "Really?" Oh my God, could I? That would be heavenly. The way she said heavenly sent another jolt right through me, straight to my groin. "Sure thing," I said, my voice tight as a banjo string. "Just gotta hang on a sec." I couldn't exactly pull over. Not yet. I kept one hand on the wheel and reached back with my right arm, fumbling blindly through the narrow opening to the sleeper cab. It was an awkward stretch for a big guy like me. My fingers brushed against a spare jug of oil, a greasy toolbox, and a crumpled bag of pork rinds that had been there since Nebraska. Then finally, I felt it. The soft, worn fabric of my favorite red and black plaid flannel. I snagged it and yanked it through into the front. "Here you go," I said, handing it over. It felt warm from being in the back, and it smelled faintly of me, diesel and laundry soap and the open road. She took it like I was handing her a mink coat. She buried her face in it for a second and inhaled deeply. she hummed. "Thank you, Sam. You're my knight in shining. Peterbilt." She held the shirt up. On her, it was a circus tent. It was enormous. She looked at me, then at the shirt, then back at me, and that playful, wicked glint was back in her eyes, brighter than ever. "Okay," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that did funny things to my insides. "Here's the deal. You have to promise. Eyes on the road. No peeking." "My eyes are glued to the white lines, darling." "Scout's honor." I lied through my teeth without a moment's hesitation. My eyes were glued to my passenger side mirror, which, God bless its convex soul, gave me a perfect, if slightly warped, view of the entire passenger seat. It was a dirty, rotten, beautiful cheat, and I felt like a damn king. She turned away from me, facing her door, giving me a view of her elegant, bare back and the sharp, delicate line of her spine. She draped my big flannel over her shoulders like a king-sized cape. For a second, she was completely hidden under a sea of red and black plaid. Then I saw her shoulders move. I saw her hands working under the fabric. I saw the little white towel go slack. And then I saw it fall. It didn't make a sound. It just dropped onto the seat, a crumpled, damp little heap of surrender on the black vinyl, a white flag in a war that was already over before the first shot was fired. She was now wearing absolutely nothing but my shirt. She shrugged it on properly, her slender, pale arms sliding into the sleeves that were way too long for her, the cuffs dangling past her fingertips like a little kid wearing her dad's clothes. The shirt came down to her mid-thighs, a ridiculously short, impromptu dress, and she left the front completely, gloriously unbuttoned. My reflection in the mirror was a cartoon. My jaw was on the floorboards. My eyes were the size of hubcaps. I was a damn fool, staring like I'd never seen a woman before, and I didn't care. She turned back around, a slow, deliberate motion, a triumphant little smile on her face. "There," she said, her voice husky. "Much better. So much softer." Softer wasn't the word. It was apocalyptic. The open front of the shirt was a direct invitation, a parted curtain on the main event. It framed the valley between her breasts, and every time she breathed, the worn red and black fabric shifted, offering tantalizing glimpses of the pale, soft skin underneath. The heater was still blasting, and her skin was slick with a light sweat, glowing in the green light. She stretched, a lazy, cat-like arch of her back, pushing her chest forward, and the shirt pulled tight across her breasts. I could see the perfect round outline, the hard points of her nipples pressing insistently against the thin flannel. It was the most erotic thing I had ever seen. I nearly drove us into a goddamn pine tree. The tires hit the shoulder with a loud brrrt, and I yanked the wheel back, my heart trying to exit through my throat. The whole rig shuddered. "Easy there, big guy," she purred, and I knew she knew exactly what she was doing. She was playing me like a fiddle, and I was singing her favorite tune. She reached out and put a hand on my forearm. Her fingers were warm now, and they traced a slow, deliberate circle on my bicep, right over the faded tattoo of an eagle. Her touch was fire. Just drive. But I couldn't just drive. My brain had shut down. All systems were being rerouted to my groin. The cab felt like a Finnish sauna. The windows were completely whited out with fog, except for the small frantic arc the defroster was clearing on the windshield. We were in our own private, steamy bubble, hurtling through the dark, invisible to the rest of the world. My hand went to the gear shift. This time, when my knuckles brushed her thigh, she didn't just let it happen. She moved her leg, just a fraction, pressing it firmly against my hand. She kept it there. My hand was on the shifter knob, and her bare, warm thigh was pressed against my knuckles. We drove like that for a mile, then 2. The silence was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. The only sounds were the engine, the rain, and our own breathing, which was getting faster and heavier in a synchronized rhythm. I couldn't take it anymore. I was a boiler about to explode. I was a dam with a million cracks. "Candy?" I said, my voice a low growl I barely recognized. "Yes, Sam," she whispered back, not moving her leg, her voice thick with anticipation. I didn't say another word. I just looked at her. My eyes left the road for a dangerous second and locked with hers. She looked back, her eyes dark and deep in the dashboard light. Her lips were parted, waiting. She knew. I knew. This train was going off the rails. With my left hand still gripping the wheel, I flicked on my right turn signal. The click-clack, click-clack was deafening in the silence. A metronome counting down to the inevitable. Up ahead, I saw the sign for a scenic overlook. A dark, deserted patch of gravel for tourists to look at the valley during the day. Tonight, it was just an empty slice of darkness. A perfect hiding spot. I eased the big rig off the highway, the massive tires crunching on the gravel. I pulled us into the farthest, darkest corner of the lot, under the heavy shadow of some ancient pine trees, and killed the headlights. The world plunged into near-total blackness. I left the engine idling, its deep rumble a steady, powerful heartbeat in the dark. I turned to her. She hadn't moved an inch. She was just watching me, her hand still a warm weight on my arm, her leg still pressed against my hand on the shifter. "My friend's house can probably wait a little while," she said softly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "Yeah," I breathed, the word coming out on a cloud of steam. "I think it can." I unbuckled my seatbelt. It retracted with a loud, violent snap that made us both jump. She unbuckled hers, the sound softer, a quiet click. In the impossibly tight space of the cab, we turned to face each other. I reached out, my hand finding the warm, smooth skin of her leg, right where the hem of my flannel shirt ended. I slid my hand up her thigh, my rough palm a stark contrast to her silkiness. She let out a little gasp, a sound that was half shock, half invitation, and her fingers tightened on my arm. "Sam," she whispered, her eyes fluttering shut. "The back's more comfortable?" I rasped, my thumb drawing slow, agonizing circles on the tender skin of her inner thigh. Territory no man had probably charted in a long, long time. "More room to stretch out." She nodded, her eyes still closed, a silent, complete surrender. "Show me." Getting from the front of a Peterbilt to the sleeper cab is not a ballet. It's a clumsy, awkward crawl through a hole that was not designed for 2 people at once, especially not when one of them is my size. But right then, it was the sexiest goddamn dance in the world. I went first, backing into the dark, hot space, my bulk filling the opening. She followed, crawling on her hands and knees over the center console, the gear shift, everything. My flannel shirt, still unbuttoned, gaped wide open. For one glorious, heart-stopping moment, I was looking straight down at her perfect, naked breasts, swaying gently with her movement, their pink tips aimed right at me like twin compass needles pointing north. She tumbled in after me, landing half on top of me on the narrow, firm mattress. The space was tiny. It was dark. It was hot as hell, and it smelled like us. Sweat, cheap soap, expensive woman, and something electric and alive. I could feel every single inch of her. The softness of her stomach against my side, the firm press of her thigh wedged against mine, the sharp point of her hip digging into my ribs. Her wet hair fell across my face, smelling of the storm we'd left outside, and her own unique, intoxicating scent. "It's hot back here," she whispered, her breath a hot puff against my ear. "Gonna get a hell of a lot hotter," I promised, my voice a low rumble that matched the engine. My hands went to the shirt. My big, clumsy fingers fumbled with the worn fabric. She didn't help me. She just lay there, her chest rising and falling fast, watching me work in the dim light. I pushed the shirt off her shoulders. It slid down her slick, sweat-dewed arms and pooled in a heap of red and black around her waist, trapping her legs. And there she was, all of her, glowing in the faint green light, filtering in from the dash, a masterpiece of pale skin and dark shadows, laid out on the cheap sheets of my sleeper cab like a banquet. What happened next wasn't about words. It was a different kind of language, spoken with hands and mouths and bodies. My hands, calloused and rough, that knew nothing but diesel and steel and greasy wrenches, were learning the poetry of her skin. Her small, delicate hands roamed over my broad chest and back, her fingers digging into my shoulders like she was trying to hold on in an earthquake. Our kisses were hungry and wet and tasted of rain and desperation and the faint, sweet trace of her. She was a goddamn firecracker. All the fear and frustration from her night had been compressed into a diamond-hard core of pure, raw energy, and it was all exploding now. She climbed on top of me, straddling my hips, her knees on either side of me, taking control. Her body moved with a powerful primal rhythm that was all her own, a frantic dance in the dark, and the steel stallion, my 40-ton beast of a truck, started to rock. Gently at first, a slow, easy sway that was barely perceptible, then not so gently. The old suspension began to groan and squeak, a rhythmic protest against the strain, a sound I'd never heard it make before. Squeak, groan, squeak, groan. A mechanical song of our efforts. The stallion was bucking like she was trying to throw a rodeo clown. The windows, already foggy, became completely opaque, sweat and steam dripping in rivulets down the inside of the glass, erasing the outside world completely. We were a two-person hurricane in a 10-foot box. Anyone out there in the dark would have just seen a parked truck, its engine rumbling, vibrating almost silently under the pines. They would have seen the windows weeping on the inside, as if the truck itself was sweating. It was a wrestling match in a hot, dark, confined space. A tangle of limbs and skin and sweat and my flannel shirt, which was now a casualty, hopelessly tangled in the sheets somewhere beneath us. We didn't stop. We didn't talk. The whole universe shrank to the size of that sleeper cab, to the feeling of her skin on mine, finding a rhythm that shook the very foundations of my truck. The engine idled on, a steady bass line to the frantic, wild song we were making. After a long, long time, when every muscle in my body was screaming and the air was too thick to breathe, the rocking slowed. The suspension gave one last weary groan and fell silent. The cab was quiet, except for the steady rumble of the diesel and our own ragged, desperate gasps for air. She collapsed on top of me, a dead weight, her face buried in my chest, her body slick and drenched. I was drenched. The cheap sheets were soaked. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight, feeling the frantic beat of her heart against my ribs, slowly returning to a normal rhythm. We lay like that for a long time, just breathing each other's air. The heat was still oppressive, but it felt good now. It felt like victory. "Wow," she finally whispered into my chest. The word was muffled, but it carried. "Yeah," I grunted, my hand stroking her damp, tangled hair. Wow is right. She lifted her head, her eyes locking with mine in the darkness. She kissed me, a slow, sweet, exhausted kiss that tasted like triumph. You saved my life tonight, Sam. Nah, I said, a grin spreading across my face. I think we just saved each other from a boring Tuesday. An hour later, I was pulling up to a small, neat-looking house with a yellow porch light cutting a hole in the darkness. Oak Haven. We'd found her friend's house. As I pulled to the curb, the air brakes hissing softly, she was shrugging my flannel shirt back on. The cab was cool now, the windows clear. You know, she said, buttoning 2 or 3 of the middle buttons but leaving the top and bottom ones open, creating a very deep V-neck and a very high leg slit. I think I'm going to keep this as a souvenir. The shirt was still a tent on her, but somehow she wore it like it was custom-made couture, a badge of honor from her weird, wild night. It looks better on you than it ever did on me, I said. It was the oldest line in the book, but damn it if it wasn't the God's honest truth. She leaned across the cab and gave me one last, long, deep kiss. It was full of heat and memory, and the unspoken knowledge that this was a one-time-only event, a lightning strike. Thank you for everything, Sam the trucker, she whispered against my lips. Anytime, Candy, anytime. She hopped out of the cab, still barefoot, wearing my shirt like a trophy, and ran up the walk to the front door. She didn't look back. The door opened, a rectangle of warm light spilled out, and she was swallowed by it. Then she was gone. I sat there for a minute, the passenger seat empty and already starting to feel cold, but the cab still smelled of her. Of her soap and her skin and the storm we'd made. It was a good smell. I put the truck in gear and pulled away, the big engine rumbling its approval. I was alone again, just me and the long, black road. I glanced over at the passenger seat. Lying there, in a crumpled, pathetic little heap on the black vinyl, was a small, damp, white motel towel. A huge grin split my face. I reached over, picked it up between my thumb and forefinger like it was a holy relic, and tossed it onto my dashboard. My own little souvenir. I cranked up the radio, found a station blasting AC/DC, and pushed my steel stallion back onto the dark, wet highway. The rain had finally stopped. The air smelled clean. The night felt brand new and full of possibilities. And I had a hell of a story that nobody would ever believe.